What's good everybody, this is CP and welcome back to my NBA Fantasy series. If this is your first time here, be sure to check out my fantasy playlist with the links below, where you can find out about potential sleepers, players to avoid, and young players you might want to target in deep keeper and dynasty leagues. Today I'll be talking about some very basic fantasy basketball strategies, which can potentially help you put together the best possible fantasy teams this year and help you win your leagues. So without further ado, let's get it. In fantasy basketball, playing time is probably the most important asset a player needs, especially if you want them to maximize their potential as a fantasy commodity. Simply put, no matter how good a player is, it is impossible for them to provide decent value if they are riding the pine every night. I'm not very good at math, but if a player like LeBron James only gets 5 minutes a night, I can almost guarantee that he won't be able to put up 25, 8, and 9 a night. As a result, when you consider drafting or trading for players in your leagues, forecasting how much playing time they will get will be key. In my opinion, the easiest way to do that is to go on any NBA related websites and pull up the team's depth charts and see where the player stands. Take a look to see if your target player is a starter or has potential to become one. On top of that, see if there are any high usage players on their team who might take the ball away from them, and if there are any players who can potentially be a threat to their minutes. All of these factors are good things to consider. Ideally, I want all my players to be starters and playing over 30 minutes a night, but obviously that's not possible, especially in deeper leagues with savvy owners. So if anything, I try to target players with at least 15 to 20 minutes a night, along with upside to earn more playing time as the season goes on. Another common mistake I see a lot of people make is that they overhype rookies and take them way too early in drafts. Every year I see managers that load up on rookies pay the price big time and end up near the bottom of the standings. A good example from last season would be teams that reach for players like Markelle Fultz, Malik Monk, and Frank Ntilikina too early. Simply put, the NBA is the best basketball league in the world, and you can't expect every rookie to come in and play like Damian Lillard right away. For example, a player like James Harden, who was the 3rd overall pick back in 2009, took almost 4 years and had to get traded to become the elite fantasy player he is today. Another good example is a player like CJ McCollum. He was a top 10 pick in his draft but only averaged 6 points and less than 1 assist in his first 2 seasons. We didn't really see him break out until his 3rd year, and since then he has been a very high-end guard in fantasy basketball. Don't get me wrong, every once in a while you might luck out on a player like Donovan Mitchell, but overall I think the risk is too high, especially if you plan to spend an early pick on a rookie who might be 2 to 3 years away from being very good. So unless you are playing in deep dynasty and keeper leagues, you should be very careful about taking a rookie, considering how most of them won't give you the best chance to win in redraft leagues right away. A rookie mistake some people make when playing fantasy basketball is that they try too hard to put together teams that are competitive in every category. We can't forget that this is fantasy basketball, and unlike real life, you don't need to put together a well-balanced team to win it all, especially in head-to-head leagues. When you are competing against knowledgeable owners, it is very hard for you to draft a team that excels in every category. But most importantly, I have found success without employing that strategy. For example, in standard head-to-head 9 category leagues, you only need to win 5 categories every week to come out on top. So if you end up with a player like Anthony Davis early on in your draft, it might make sense to build upon your strengths instead of chasing unrelated categories with your next few picks. Since Davis provides you with decent value in blocks, rebounds, field goal percentage, and a low turnover rate, you can use your second pick on an excellent complementary player like Rudy Gobert. This would solidify your strengths and make you a very dominant team in those categories. Depending on the makeup of your team, sometimes punting a category is not a bad idea as well. We also can't forget that successful teams usually draft very well with mid to late round picks. They fill up their lineup with sleepers, potential breakout, and undervalued players who can outplay their draft positions. So in a sense, they don't really need to waste a pick to chase a category. Overall, the bottom line is that most teams can still win a championship without being dominant in every category. So be sure to keep that in mind when you are drafting or putting together your teams this year. In most fantasy basketball leagues, playoffs and finals usually start around late March and early April. In my opinion, this adds a little more value to good players that play on mediocre or borderline playoff teams. For example, players like Anthony Davis, Damian Lillard, Karl Anthony Towns, and Nikola Jokic fits that category. They don't play on title contending teams but will likely be battling for a playoff spot during that time. So their teams will likely give them all the minutes they can handle, and they will likely be playing their best basketball during the most crucial time of your fantasy fantasy season. Meanwhile, star players who play on stacked teams might run into the risk of sitting out games down the stretch, especially if their teams have already locked up a playoff spot. With that in mind, I wouldn't be surprised to see a player like Steph Curry, Kevin Durant, or Chris Paul cost a fantasy team their playoff series during that time. Obviously, this is a bit harder to control, but it is something you might want to consider when drafting or trading for players in your leagues this year. So that's a look at a few basic fantasy basketball tips that can help you put together the best possible team this year. If you have been enjoying my NBA fantasy videos, please show me some love by liking, sharing, and subscribing. I want to thank everyone for the wonderful support so far. It really means a lot and inspires me to make more videos. And that's it for today. I'll see everybody next time.